All righty, let's dive right in, Chris. And I want to start by asking you, you and I've been talking for many, many years on the Tough Mudder side. And I don't think we've made it clear in the times that we've talked so far this year about your role. The stuff we're going to talk about today has mostly been handled by Watson, David Watson, the last few years, as I think his title was VP of product or just VP product. Get rid of the sounds cooler, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, and I know that's more now where you're moving into. So you want to start there, what your current role is at Spartan Inc. or Spartan Worldwide or whatever the company is called now?
Yeah, for sure. So you're spot on. So, I've stepped into sort of the global VP of product role.
So there is an of, just to be sure, there is an of in there.
Depends how formal we're being, but yeah, why not? And yeah, in the sort of current world of Spartan being a portfolio brand, we had looked around at how to frankly best keep our products separate and distinct. And as counterintuitive as it might be, we've realized that the best way to do that is actually to organize the department under, one individual that sat on both, so we could make sure we weren't crossing streams unnecessarily. And, I think, me, I've been racing Spartan, Tough Mudder, World's Toughest, and Savage, whatever, for as long as the industry has been around. So, personally, I'm super passionate just about the sport in general. And I love all of the ways that every event, no matter how similar they might look to an outsider, is a completely different experience on site. And so a huge part of my focus is figuring out how to make each of the individual product offerings and brands function as the best version of themselves.
Okay. So to that end, what are we going to announce today that will be launched on the 17th or 18th?
It will be Wednesday, the 18th. We'll be announcing this
okay,
publicly.
So what are we talking about that while people are watching this in the future, in the 18th, what will we be announcing?
So we're talking about Spartan Sport in 2024. So we've got some...
God, it's 2024? Oh my God.
I can't. We're in this weird world now where we're talking about 2024 so often that I keep putting that on things that are still for 2023. But yeah, very much we're thinking about next year and the future. And what you and I are talking about is specifically the sports side of Spartan for next year. So championship events and the way competitive racing is going to work at every Spartan event worldwide in 2024. So
alrighty.
I think on that first point around championships, we're getting into championship season now. It's super exciting. We've got OCRWC just happened. We have World's Toughest Mudder coming up. We have Abu Dhabi coming up. There's a lot of really good stuff going on right now. Yes, yeah, trifecta world champs. Never want to leave that one out. And as we look ahead to next year, one of our focuses was how to grow those championship events while also making the general progression between them a little bit simpler. So, we had a lot of exciting things happening this year. We had Elite Series, we had Age Group Series, we had these things, individual age group championship events by region. So we had a lot going on, and the pivot for next year is to simplify our championship structure into 3 tiers of national events, regional events, and world championship events. And that will be pretty much replicated worldwide. So
we're not there already. We're not currently there, because I feel like I know there was a plan at one point. I have a deck somewhere where they were all supposed to kind of feed into each other in some form or fashion. The U.S. National Series, fed into the North American Championship, and I thought that was kind of where we were. Is that not where we're at?
So that's what we were working towards. I've probably teased with you a graphic of what we were looking at, and there was a step towards that this year. Next year, it's being sort of taken to the next level. So right now there are some differences regionally with the way series were working. And I think notably the age group championship events this year and the would have been elite championship events this year have been in different locations on different weekends. For next year, we're doing a few things from a calendar perspective. We're trying to keep all of the national series events wherever we can before the regional event, so that they all flow up to the regional event, and then the regional events all flow up to the world championship events.
Right, because the last 2 years they were out of order. One was like a COVID makeover, and then this year I forget why, but yeah, you end up having the North American, or what we now call the Pan American Championship, prior to the last race, which actually just happened, and that always seems a bit odd.
Right. Yeah. And what we're looking for is what you get in most sports around the world, right? You have a regular season, you have a postseason, you have a final championship event. It makes storytelling a lot easier, both for us, also for you, I hope. And, it just helps the ritualization throughout the year. It helps people plan their calendars. And it also lets us set a qualification system that's a lot simpler when you're coming in through the national events and qualifying into the regional, and then you're performing at regional and qualifying into the world events. It's a nice, accessible way to know exactly what you have to do to move yourself up to the next level in the series. So we're excited about that. There are a few small outliers for next year. Ultra World Champs we already announced for next year. That's going to be in Morzine in France. That'll be over the summer, so it won't be at the end of the year like most of our World Championship events. But by and large, it's the simplest we've been able to button up. And again, roughly the same worldwide. So your Canadian, US, Mexican events, national series events will all feed up into the Pan American Championship event, which will fall before the majority of our World Championship events. So nice, fun structure I think we'll have. Additionally, we always think back to the early days, when it was the road to Tahoe. Really simple narrative. Everyone was gunning for that thing at the end of the season. And we had one event that we were driving all of our best athletes to. We're looking for a version of that, right? You want your Pan American Championship event to be this hub of people who are just super excited about the sport. They're there for the competition. And we think that by putting the overall championship, for like pro level athletes and all of our age group championships on the same weekend, that gives that vibe on site that it's just the place to be. It's a bigger event. It's more happening. We can do sort of cooler stuff there.
Yeah, and to bring people up to speed, that was the tradition. I would say going back to Killington, but I'm not sure. I think Killington, we were still in that. We had there was competitive and open anyway. But since the age group and elite championships were happening in Tahoe, the elites ran on Saturday and everyone else ran on Sunday or whatever it was. I forgot the days, but basically the last few weekends it's been Killington was the age group championship and Tahoe, or where's the world championship? Abu Dhabi was the world championship.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, one of the cool things about being in, you can't even call it a fledgling sport anymore, but about a sport that's structured like OCR is that you're doing the same course as the best racers in the world. You're seeing how your time stacks up to their time. There's this element of accessibility that you get in a sport like this that you just, you don't get. You're comparing how good you are at football to the NFL or something of that nature. So we think it's an exciting way to make those events, packed the spot to be and cherry pick the best events we have around the world. I think the next level of that at the world championship level, you'll see for next year. And it's the way it's been going for a few years is we have world championships at a few different, specialties, I guess you could call it. There's been some moves over the years of if it was a beast championship, if it was this year, there's a 3K and a beast, but a lot of the prize money is on the 3K. For next year, we're looking to level the playing field at the world championship level. I think Spartan as a brand, the message we have is that, there's no one way to be the best athlete. It's about doing stuff that's super hard and pushing yourself and, staying fit, getting off the couch, and being adaptable. And to that end, we're moving away from saying, this is the one championship and saying, here's world championships for different disciplines. Okay. So we have the Ultra World Championships for next year. We, of course, have Trifecta World Championships again. There'll be a Beast World Championship. And then we'll also have a short distance or short format World Championship weekend, where we're working through some of the details on it. But, focus for that really short, fast athlete who probably isn't competitive at the ultra level, but can kill it at that short level. And we want to honor and have opportunities to compete in the sport at the top level for all of those disciplines.
So more than Abu Dhabi? I'm a little confused.
Yeah, so we won't be announcing exactly where everything's going to be next year just yet. That's coming in November. But the goal is to have basically dedicated championships at a few different distances. All of those won't be in Abu Dhabi. Already for next year, Morzine is the Ultra World Championship, obviously trifectas and Sparta, and then some other updates to come soon on where the additional World Championship events will be.
Okay.
Yeah. The other change, we wanted to talk to you about is the way competitive racing is going to work on your average event weekend. So your non-national series, non-championship event weekend. We were digging into the numbers earlier this year, and what we were seeing is that the sport on the one hand is as hot as ever, and on the other hand, we've actually seen a reduction in the number of racers competing, performing at a competitive level, I guess you should say. So, this year we have our age group heats and we have our elite heats, and both of those in most markets have actually shrunk a little bit. We've been seeing growth in the open heats. And Spartan has always been built on the, premise that the sport side of the events is what gives them longevity. People come back and race way more often when they're racing competitively. They're the ones coming out and going on to do national or regional series events. And so it's really a focus of ours for next year to help grow the number of people that are racing with us rather than just coming out to do to try out the obstacles, run the course at their own pace, that sort of thing. And what we ended up coming up with is that we're going to basically combine the competitions into one big competitive group leaderboard for the weekend, and then there'll be open racers that come later in the day. So what that looks like is, instead of making racers choose in advance, basically self-identifying if they're an elite athlete, if they're an age group athlete, not knowing, we want anyone who is competitive, wants to race competitively, to sign up in this competitive heat. We'll be sending off racers by their anticipated pace, and we've got some tools in the registration flow to help people estimate the way they'll be going off, but it mimics the way a marathon start works, right? So you have your fastest racers up front and the next fastest. And they'll be going off on rolling starts first thing in the morning out onto the course. Now, doing the pace-based start has a few benefits. One is, and the biggest one, is lines on course. There's nothing worse when you're trying to earn a podium spot than getting stuck at a line at an obstacle or hitting a single track trail. So sending people off according to their pace really helps you alleviate that, right? The second heat should never catch the first heat if the first heat was faster. That's why they do it at marathons. We think it'll work really well here. And again, we have all the sort of info for estimating your pace, in the registration funnel there. The other thing it does, it helps people hopefully run faster races. It's always more motivating to run with someone at your side who you're running shoulder to shoulder with, trying to compete, because you run a similar pace, than it is, to have massive swings to, running with people of all different pace groups, and you're trying to catch and pass someone who started before you. So we think it makes the competition on those weekends particularly exciting. The other thing it does, the way the podium will work is that the top 3 fastest times, male and female, those will be your overall winners for the weekend. They'll be your podium winners. And then everyone else will be ranked within their age bracket. This is really common in a lot of trail racing sports. World's Toughest Mudder does it this way. But effectively, what we want to get across as a brand is that Spartan's a meritocracy. Your fastest runner on the day wins the podium. Doesn't matter if they've registered for a certain category in advance or anything else. The fastest racer should win. So it allows us to give someone who maybe thought they were an age group athlete, was going to compete in their age group, the opportunity to actually win outright, with some perks that come along with that. We'll also, really elevating the age group experience. We think that the competitions are better when more people are competing. So We'll have some really great age group competitions that come out of this category as well, where your top 3 times for each age group, those are going to be your age group winners. We have some really badass new age group medals that are coming for next year. We'll still have an age group ceremony. So there's a lot we're doing.
When will the awards be?
So they'll be late morning. It's going to depend on the distance of the race for the day. But basically we'll have a buffer in there on the day, from when the last competitive racer goes out until when we feel we can, fairly have that award ceremony to make sure that any podium athlete will have come across the line in time.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get this straight, because if you're self-seeding, the fastest person might not be in the first wave.
Yes, that's correct. So it'll be based on chip time.
Right. So then competitive racing will be from what time to what time, like ballpark?
It'll be similar to it is right now for the elite and age group. So starting 7 a.m. and likely being all done by 8 a.m. So it's roughly an hour window people will be going out between. But
So
it'll vary by race
anybody who
capacity.
previously raced age group, when were those people stopping? Because I'm just trying to think numbers wise.
It's effectively the same scope of time. Typically for the latter half of this season, we were sending off elite racers right around 7 and age groupers immediately following. So it doesn't really push back when in the day those racers are going out. It adjusts the organization of those heats.
Well, you're talking about competing against your, I guess, contemporaries. I thought that people really did like that in age group, that they know the people that they're in their age group with a lot of the times, because they're going to a lot of the same races, and they're able to see who they are racing against because they started together, all the 40-year-olds or whatever it is.
Yeah, so it's definitely it's a shift in focus, right? The focus is on the overall competition and running your best race rather than necessarily tailoring your performance just against your peers that are in the age group. So, we know there's a benefit. It is nice to race if you only care about your age group podium. There's of course benefits standing right next to the guy that is going to be you and him, seeing him side by side. And that's the reason when you go to the next tier of events, we haven't touched on this yet, but once you start racing at the championship level, we will be releasing age brackets together. So you've got your regular event weekends where it's basically everyone putting on their best performance, see where they slot out. And then when you move on to the championship level events, we'll have an overall championship and we'll have an age group championship.
But so for the series races, is that still going to be the same way? Like whatever it ends up being, like best 4 or 5 or whatever the series races that we usually do?
So we have, just before this interview goes out, we'll be releasing some infographics that probably make this clearer than the way I can describe it in words. But you'll basically have your regular event weekends. You'll have a competitive heats, open heats. Depending how you perform at the competitive heat level at a normal event weekend, your best athletes there will qualify for the overall championship heat at a national series event, and anyone below that can race age group at the championship level event.
Okay. But you see, when you say championship, I think like one race. I'm talking about a series. In the past, there's always been a series, sometimes 4, sometimes 5.
Yeah, so that's probably helpful.
That's what I'm asking about. That's what I'm asking.
So when I'm saying championship level, I mean anything elevated above a regular event weekend. So that's national series, that's regional championship, and that's world championship events.
So I can't self-seed for national championship. I have to race other races first.
For the top tier, you have to qualify in. All right. So if you want to race for the prize purse at a national series event, you'll have to qualify into that based on your performance on a regular event weekend.
Okay. So then are these all like way later in the year? What's the qualification window?
So we have some FAQs that'll be coming out today, but basically you can pre-qualify in to those national series events based on 2023 performance.
Okay.
Or top 3 on any event weekend next year in a competitive heat. So big group of people will be pre-qualified in for those early season races, and then throughout the year, more and more people will be qualifying in to be able to race there.
Okay. Are you allowed to say at least like how many races we think it might be, the National Series or Pan
National
American?
Series, yeah. So National Series will be 3 races.
Three
It'll
races.
be a sprint, a super, and a beast.
Okay.
That's the goal, and every country that can support that. There's a couple countries that don't do enough races to have one of each format, but the goal is to align it with
I
the
like
overall.
that. I like one of each. I think we've all kind of, I think it was supers and beasts and heavier on the beast side for a long time. And I think everyone's wanted some form of let's mix it up. Does this mean there's not a 3K?
Not at the National Series level. So when we drop the events in November, you'll see we do have some 3Ks planned in for the year. But the National Series, which is, in the vast majority of countries, it'll be a sprint, a super, and a beast, which I'll tally up to a trifecta.
So these three events will be somewhere in the country, and will you have to do all three to qualify for Worlds, I guess?
No, so it'll go your performance in a regular event weekend qualifies you in for the National Series events. Performance in National Series events would qualify you in for regional championship and then on to Worlds. Um, the way the criteria are basically set up is if you come in top 20 at a National Series event, any of them, you don't need to do all three. That'll get you a spot in the pro championship, the top level championship at the regional level.
So you can't just go straight to Worlds?
You can. So I should caveat this. The age group championships at any of those 3 levels, you can just register straight into. You need to qualify into that top level championship that has a prize purse.
So there's no pre-qualifying for Worlds though for elites? Like if you won last year or whatever?
No, so there's no at the world level. We've not put anything out yet. We'll see how this season wraps up. Whether we reserve some spots for invites, maybe, but the whole idea with the progression is to make it really simple and really clear. You need to qualify in to the next level. And anyone that performs well this year at the world championship level, we don't think it's going to be a huge lift to qualify in.
So, I mean, I can't say I'm surprised when the 3K was announced. I said, I'm not sure this will last. It wouldn't be unlike Spartan. They've made a lot of changes before. There was no guarantee, but I guess I'm not surprised. But I think some people will be frustrated because they were upset because they had to like train for a different kind of race. And now they're being trained to like, okay, I don't think many people change their life anyway, but just like, all right, well now this is like now we're kind of being jerked back the other way.
So I want to be clear, we're not pulling all of those short distance, the short format races out. The national series just isn't based around them.
Right, but
So
those were the only ones that mattered though. There wasn't 3Ks at regular races. They were only at the series races.
well, there's a world championship level. The Western European market did it a little bit differently this year. Madrid was the only 3K they did. It was at the conclusion of a series of sprints. So it was it wasn't completely consistent this year. Um, we'll be announcing the actual locations and distances, like I said, in November, but we're not killing that, but we are focusing at the national level on what we know are scalable, successful events at a couple different formats, with the purpose being, right, your best sprint racer may not be your best beast racer. Some athletes are incredibly proficient across the board. So those
Yeah,
events
and
we know we can run consistently for age group or, like your pro level athletes.
I think the format that you're talking about is what makes sense in most of sport. So I think people in the OCR world know like that's how Savage has always done it. Like first across the line, 1, 2, 3. If you're fourth place, you're now first in your age group. Like that's sort of, you actually didn't do that for World's Toughest the first time you did age group. You double dipped, and I said, why are you guys double dipping? Like Trevor Psychos is not the first best page grouper. He's the second best in the world, but you fixed that, thankfully.
Yeah.
Um, um, the the I think it might take some getting used to, because if let's just say for sake of argument, Atkins or Kent or any of these top women finish fourth, like do they care that they're first in their age group? Maybe not. And then the other piece, the really hard piece, the bad news for you, Chris, is that we have a sport that doesn't pay people to judge, and what do you call it? Um, Penalizing racers and all that stuff that should happen makes it a little wonky, and I don't see that getting any better unless you guys magically say, Matt, we've solved that problem. So that's the only other issue I potentially see.
Yeah, and it's in our plans to help troubleshoot the officiating issues we've had. Also going further, we switched from burpees to penalty loops with for the reason that they're easier to officiate. This was year one with that. We need to button up the protocols there. We're doing a lot of work on the back end of standardizing those loops, how to make sure that the penalty fits the crime essentially with obstacle failure. So there's some optimization that we know is super important for this. That has to happen concurrently with growing the sport. I think the whole purpose, whether it was elite or age group this year or it's competitive next year, anyone's who's competing to stand on a podium and say that they won their respective category needs to be held to the same standard. And we need to keep pushing towards that. It just doesn't, the sport doesn't operate long term in the absence of that.
Yeah, and we've just sadly never been great at it. I say we as an entire sport, and it's just because of the volume of people that go through the waves, and because it's never been something that Spartan or anyone has put a ton of money into. It's always been volunteer based. So what was I going to say? The self seeding that you're talking about. I'm so when you're saying on the when I sign up for the Peachtree 10K, the world's largest 10K, they say, what do you expect your pace to be? And they allow you to type that in. And then I think you might add a link for verification if it's under something, maybe not. But you're saying, so similarly here, you're gonna you're gonna ask people a question because OCR is different than a 5K, and that's gonna put them in an approximate time. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, so there'll be 5 pace groups for each for all of those events, and depending if you're running a sprint, a super, a beast, an ultra, whatever, it'll prompt you basically, estimated finish time or your best beast time, or to give you a couple data points to help you approximate. Now, we'll have to validate throughout the year, right? If a racer is routinely lying about their pace, then we're going to reassign them. We can just we can move their pace group, right?
There'll definitely be some people that do that for sure.
Right. And I think you and I have raced enough. Most people are honest because no one wants to be that person. Most people don't want to be that person that's just getting relentlessly passed all day, every day, and it's really obvious who's been lying. But there are always some bad eggs out there we can correct, and for future races, if they're racing with us routinely, we can just reassign them to another group.
It's funny you say that, but you do see it. I mean, you do see it, at OCRWC. Speaking of which, like every year there's people that like line up with the fastest guys, and it's like, they finish 28th. It's like, what are you doing? Just take 2 steps back. Like, why do you want to be in the front? What do you want to be in the front line for? Like, let Atkins through.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, so I haven't mentioned it yet, but so there's 5 pace groups. If you've podiumed either in 24 or if you had an elite podium in 23, we'll be distributing what we're calling a pro band. And basically that gets you to the front of the start line. So it's a physical band. You show that when you're loading into the
Get
start
out of
chute.
here. Get out of here.
Does this make you happy?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So there is an earned way. You'll be given that on the podium
Elite
at any
coming through, baby. Hold up that wrist. Love it.
Yeah. So that'll pop you to the front. So we actually have a way, there's a merit-based way to get the fastest racers to the front of that start line. And then we'll police what happens after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing from this conversation and from you and I offline is let's just use the word streamlining. And sadly, Chris, Spartan's not been great at this. And I think what someone like you can do, if they let you, is we get some stuff that does stick, right? Because my laptop and inbox are full of PDFs of plans, like of tiers and series and changes year in, year out, year in, year out. And this is the way we're going to do it. And it's been super frustrating. And I think a guy like you that likes order, that likes efficiency, and not for nothing, but like this idea of, by the way, your first event in the series is February, and we've told you on December 5th. And again, like, if you're an OCR racer, you're probably staying in shape year round, but like the idea of, we should be able to announce it somewhere sooner. Like, as soon as WTM's over, we know the next year. As soon as OCRWC is over, why can't we do that for series? Even if we don't know the exact markets, can we say, hey, like, this is what our series looks like moving forward, and not just like, all right, Christmas time, I hope we know something.
Yeah. Yeah. And the goal is to pull those timelines forward, right? It's so important that diehard racers have the info they need, and prospective racers, the ones that are ultimately going to grow the sport as they come into OCR, they're not familiar with it, have the info they need to consider and then prepare for their first race. Because we do have an amazing community of athletes that are ready to rip year round, but for long-term growth, you've got to accommodate for people coming in as well. And that's at the heart of the changes, right? We want to make sure we have a system that's compelling and fair and super exciting for people who've been racing with us for a decade, and also helps get fresh blood in. And one of the things with this competitive heat, that change was, we were looking back to when Ryan Atkins came into the sport, and he just showed up and he set a world record at World Toughest Mudder and went on to have this amazing career. No one knew who he was. And for me, it's a little bit of a light bulb, where it's like, of course he should have had the podium. He did better than it. How awkward would it have been to have him stand, in a different line, because he didn't choose in advance that he was an elite. So the goal is to lower that barrier, get your fastest racers out there. And ultimately it's more exciting if you're, competing in a sport, to know you're competing against the best. So we hope that, that's exciting for everyone. We hope it leads to better racing long term, and really sucks people in.
So again, just saying it out loud to kind of recap. So for a regular race, so Nashville just happened, right? If you pick competitive, that's the only way you can win a first place. Let's assume they're going to still be plaques, or an age group medal, right? And that will stay true for the rest of the year. Like, there's no money. It's just, you're just competitive or you're not. And then when it's series time, it's more of a qualification based on other races, and now there's money for the elites.
That's correct. Yeah. So at a series, national series, regional championship, world champion event, there's basically 2 events happening at each of those. You've got a pro level championship that requires qualification. You've got an age group championship that you can just register into. That pro level's got prizing. The age group championships are going to have, age group awards. You can be the best age grouper in your country, best age grouper in the region, and so on.
And oh man, I had one more question about that. I can't think of what it was. Yeah, I lost it. Sorry.
Yeah. And again, we have some infographics dropping that'll help to explain the way this sort of all flows between each of the levels, exactly how many people will qualify from one level to the next, and so on. And then we'll be making the final announcements of exactly where all of the national championships national series events around the world will be, where all the regional championships are, where all the world championship events will be.
So that'll be after Worlds, you think? After WTM, I mean?
That'll be, just after. It's the week after Trifecta World Championships and World Toughest Mudder, which happen to be on the same day this year. It'll be just after that. We'll be announcing the actual locations.
Okay. And then hopefully moving forward can give more notice than.
Yeah. The goal is to bring those timelines further and further forward, so we can always announce the following year well in advance.
All right. Well, that's a lot. That is a lot.
Yeah, it's a good amount. It's, it's good to be busy, but I'll say, and I know you and I have talked about it offline. The goal here is to get a structure in place that'll work for the next 5 years. Not something we need to massively change year in, year out, re-educate every time. We'd like there to be a way that's intuitive, that functions, that people can get excited, that they can plan their racing around. So I think we're getting there. I think 2024 will be a great year to jump in on that, and hopefully a structure we can ride out for the near future.
So what if people 2024 races have been open for a bit? So what does that do for the registration platform or for people that
Yeah.
have already registered?
So for anyone already registered in either elite or age group categories, they'll be getting an email on the day this drops or right thereafter. That'll basically give them the next steps. But what'll happen is their tickets, they'll be recategorized as competitive, and then they'll be asked to select their pace group. So they don't have to, they're not getting refunded and re-registering or anything like that. We'll be reorganizing the heats as they'll sit for next year, and then they just need to go in and opt with the additional information we need for next year's structure.
And then starting when will it look that way online?
That change online will happen right as we announce it on Wednesday.
Okay, I just happened to click Georgia for the heck of it. It looks like it just says open, so you're going to add, I guess.
The competitive, yeah, for some that we've just opened recently, we just hid the other groups because they would be changing. Some that have been open for a while.
Okay, no, the super actually, sorry, the super, it is open elite. So yeah, so right now, currently elite and age group is, I didn't know age group was done that early. I didn't realize that that many went through that quick, but yeah, it's right now, it's currently done at 8. The first early morning heat 8:15.
Yeah. They get off early, and with that restructuring of the way we're sending off those heats in the morning, we can more effectively get all of our competitive racers out in a pretty quick period of time, without long delay. So
men and women together?
yes, based on pacing. So
okay. So no more men's heat, women's heat.
Correct.
I like that too. People have been asking for that for years. I like that too.
Yeah, there's some few, I think that's one of the big side benefits. Additionally, this has come up before, but we have a lot of people that register with their friends, and they happen to, maybe one of them just had their birthday, or maybe they're just friends of different ages. They can't race together, and so they've got to kind of split up when they get there. So another nice thing is if you actually are similar ability level to your friends or your frenemies or your rivals, you can line up next to them for your race in those heats. And it lets us fill out those heats a little more, right? You've probably seen some races we have right now. The elite field at the beginning is pretty slim. Some of the age groups are slim later in the morning. So there's nothing quite like lining up with a big group of people and getting out on the course and really busting it out. So we think the start line experience will be quite exciting next year.
Well, I've been very kind to you, but that is like the 5th time I heard your Slack go off. I'm finally calling you out on it.
I'm sorry for letting it go this long. I always forget what the computer automatically cancels out.
Just
let
yell
it be
Siri.
a sign.
Just yell Siri. Go, hey Siri, mute my Slack, and then she'll do it. That's how I do everything.
Just let it be a sign that
you're so busy.
We're working very hard for all of our customers.
It's honestly, even if I can tune it out, listeners will be like, oh my God, that was driving me crazy. It was giving me PTSD of my job. So I'm looking out for the listener out there, not just my own selfish ADD or ADHD issues. Okay. Side note, shifting gears, saw an obstacle in Mexico that looked an awful lot like cage crawl, got excited. Will we be seeing a version of that on Spartan Races next year?
How should I say this? It's not in the plan for a wider rollout.
Okay.
Occasionally, when we do things with licensed partners, they submit an innovation for approval, and we'll give them an okay. It's an opportunity to test, but right now we're not planning that to roll out globally next year. We do have some innovations in the funnel on the Spartan side that we've tested out in a few different locations that are planned for wider rollout next year, which we're looking to announce, near the end of the year. And we've got, resources dedicated to some innovation. I know it's been a while since Spartan has had new obstacles on the course. I think that's one of those areas where when we talk about Tough Mudder and Spartan being different, quite different, and Tough Mudder will always test random things in random places and mess with people in new ways we find. Spartan, because there's so much in the sport, we just want to make sure that we're thinking of things with less random and more thoroughly strategically planned to roll out more widely within a region.
Yeah, and I want to give people some context around this, because in the early days, so let's say 2012 to let's say 15 or 16, Tough Mudder, I almost said you guys, but you are also now Spartan, so I will not say you guys. Tough Mudder was always bigger, cooler, scarier, different fears, and we loved it. And Spartan was kind of same stuff. And I remember specifically asking Joe, and Joe said, "Hey man, like I'm trying to make a sport here. I'm not going to get into an arms race with who's can make the biggest obstacle." And I thought that makes sense. And those of us that have been around kind of get that. Like you can't have a standardized sport that's, you're going to send people through to compete and make all this stuff, and Tough Mudder is fun and we can do that. So that makes sense to me. So I don't expect a lot of information from Spartan. I'm not, some people I think still are, but you're trying to develop a product that you're selling over and over and over again, and that you're making a competitive sport, and that you want to get towards the Olympics, which is another conversation. So I understood that. So I'm okay with Spartan not innovating, but it's cool if they do.
Yeah, and the way I think about it is I completely agree, right? Having standardization super important on the sports side. I promise I just closed Slack and it still went off on me.
I didn't.
It will find a way. On the other hand, I do think a core part of what makes Spartan a compelling sport is that it's about adaptability. You're not running hurdles on a track, right? So there's always this element of trail running. There's obstacles that, test your strength in a bunch of different ways. And to that end, when we do come up with a good concept, I think it is valuable to put something out there and see who can adapt to a unique challenge, whether it's a harder rig or, something a little bit more tactile or like more dynamic. It's interesting to see, because that can really be, especially if we're getting the penalty difficulties dialed in, that can be a differentiator. Who can adapt and overcome it, and if they gain a competitive advantage because they can roll with the punches, I think that is very Spartan to me. So you'll never see a ton of it. You'll never see it to the Tough Mudder level, but there'll be things here and there that will roll out to keep it exciting and challenging and dynamic.
And back to that thing about penalty loops, is it 200 meters? Is that what we're trying to get?
So what we're looking at for next year, and I apologize, I don't know the exact number of meters off the top of my head, but we're basically looking at making an adjustment where penalties are sorted by relative difficulty level, and then the penalty loops being adapted accordingly there. So if there's an obstacle that's incredibly hard to complete, the penalty should be incredibly hard to do, or quite hard to do, right? I think the way they were initially optimized was around how long does the obstacle take? Therefore, the penalty should take longer than that. I think that's a valuable starting point, but we're now also looking at what it's like to go across a multi-rig when you're super tired and you're using every ounce of strength. Maybe it only takes you 30 seconds, but it takes 30 seconds and tons of energy. So the penalty loop does need to be adapted in such a way, whether that's by adding a carry or a crawl, whatever else. It needs to be modified in some way to make it really worth it to invest the energy in that obstacle. I think and the longer the distance that's playing out over, when you're doing that in an ultra distance, it matters even more. You don't want to give an unnecessary advantage to someone who can run all day but can't do the obstacles, just because it costs them nothing to run a 30-second penalty loop, but it will cost them a lot to do that with 100 pounds on their back. So yeah, that's sort of the direction we're going with it.